Hi everyone. I'm going to make a video to recap on what we learned yesterday. Firstly, you could open Miro. I think everyone is signed into the design team now, so everyone can edit their profile picture and their bio, as half of you have done already, and then get your image to upload here and put your name below. So going into Citrix, I asked IT to update Rhino to Rhino 8, so they finally pushed that update. And if it doesn't load, you can try go into the Citrix settings and make sure you're opening within a web browser and not within an app. But for most of you, it will load that way anyway. When it first loads, just pick millimeters as units. That keeps things really simple. I can go here. So I'm going to pick millimeters. Okay, so this is how it should load. Rhino 8 is a little bit different to Rhino 7, just a tiny bit. So the O snaps are here on the side. If I want with any menu, I could left click and drag them and drag that and put it back on the bottom. But the O snaps are fine there. And when you load this for the first time, if you missed yesterday's session, that these are the icons to create geometry here. These are more general icons about layers, properties, camera angles, saving and doing things like that. Open Grasshopper. We have these ribbon menus for tons more tools that we're not going to use right now. But you can see some of them go into curves and surfaces and solids up to ease. So we're going to stick with standard for now. And then over on the right-hand side, we have layers. And if we move these little icons at the far right, properties and display options. And if I use the middle mouse button, that gives me this quick access menu. And if I drag it by the very top of it, that will make it sort of hover there. Otherwise, if I just left click to click off, it will disappear. And that's true of every menu. So if I left click over the box menu, I get just the default thing. But if I left click and hold, I get all the other solids that I can do. But then that would disappear. But if I left click and hold, and then by the top menu, left click and hold and drag, now that will sort of stay there as a floating menu to use for all the other commands. So to start, I can just create a box and left click anywhere, left click another place, dragging off to give 2 corners, and then left click to give a height. And that creates just the first thing in the scene, a box. It can be seen in these 3 different views. By double clicking on the view title, that will expand it to be full screen. Double clicking on it again, we'll go back to the 4 square. To orbit, that's going to just be right click in perspective view, and pan is going to be holding down the shift button and holding down the right button on the mouse. And zoom is just using a 3-button mouse, the scroll wheel just going up and down. I think if you hold Alt and right button, that will also zoom. That's kind of how you could do it on a laptop with a trackpad, but you're better off having a 3-button mouse or a mouse wheel if you're using any 3D. When it comes to the 2D views, it's slightly different. The zooming in and out is still going to be the mouse wheel, or the Alt doesn't, so the Alt is not going to work here. Shift, right click just by itself and holding is going to pan, and holding Control in this case, and right click will do the zooming in and out if you were on a laptop with a trackpad and not with the mouse. Okay. So if you get lost, I'm just going to zoom in some more, that you can do Control A to select all your objects. And then using this command text prompt at the top, that I can write zoom, or I could just write Z, but zoom, and then all for all views, and then selected, or extents is everything in the model. So depending which one I wanted, selected. And now I get back here. Left clicking an object will sort of show that it's selected with this yellow line outline, and then I can press delete. So if I create another box that it's going to ask me for the first point again, but now I'm just going to type 0, 0, and I could just leave it as XY and it will assume that the Z coordinate is 0, but I can also just comma 0 for precision. And now it's going to ask me for the other corner of the base or the length. So in that case, if I type 100 for the length, and then 100 for the width, and then and enter, and then 100 for the height, I will get the thing. If I wanted, let's say I created the first point, and then for the second point, I could do 100 by 100. Now I'm giving it a coordinate, and it created the second point there, and now it wants the height. So you can give, for that second command, you can give it a coordinate by having a comma between two numbers, or you can just give it one number, and that will act as the width and then the length and then the height. If I try to create a box on top of this box, I can't sort of snap to any point on the box. If I try to get kind of even close to it, it just, if I rotate around, I can see that it's not like on that corner. So I can just delete this. And to actually snap to a point, I need to have these O snaps on. So the end point is the first one, and I can do a box. And now I can see that it's saying end there, which means it's snapping to that end point. So if I do 100, 100, 100, I can see now that box is snapped perfectly to be on that corner. But I can't snap to anywhere else on the box. I can just snap to the corners. So if I turn near on, now I can snap to any of the edges of the box, but not like anywhere in the middle. So just these edges. And I can see that the near comes up there to say that I am on this edge. So if I do near there, I can see that that box is now on that edge. And turning on and off these snaps to make sure you're precise is really, really important. It's one of the problems of young designers is when you zoom in on the drawings, nothing is actually accurately on top of something else. So the corner actually has like 20 very close, but not exactly snapped lines. And that's not a great way of drawing and can create a whole bunch of problems when exporting, depending on what you're exporting for. Okay, so I'm going to left click and select those. Delete those. And I want to get the midpoint of this cube. So one thing I just want to change here, right click, and I'm going to change ghosted mode. And that allows me to see inside. So seeing inside the box, and I can see this bottom corner like this. I'll show you how to change backgrounds later. I have to go back to the default. So from this left-hand side, I'm going to do a polyline. And if I wanted the midpoint of the whole cube, I could go from that corner to that corner. And then I would need midpoint here in the O snap, midpoint on, and then do a line. And now it will snap to the midpoint into the center of the cube. If I wanted the midpoint just of this top face, I can just draw a line across the top. And now that midpoint is perfectly in the center there. And that center is what I want when I create a cone. So if I left click on cone, it's going to ask me in the top, I can sort of see what Rhino is asking me for. It's asking me for the base of the cone. So the base of the cone is going to be the midpoint of this line. And now it's asking for either the radius or this point. So I could left click here and give it that point, which I know is a radius of, actually, I don't know, it's a radius of 50. That's a radius of 50. But anyway, I can just give it this distance here by left clicking. And then rather than give it a height, I could left click and just finish it. And that will give me the end of the cone. As you can see, it's asking for in the command line, or type 100. And that keeps everything sort of on this 100 by 100 by 100 grid. So now I want to create a sphere on top of the cone, and I don't want to use a construction line. So if I was to having the end snap on, left click on the cone, and then give it a radius of 50, which is half 100, then my sphere would be perfectly centered on the top of the cone. But I want to center it 50 units above the top of the cone. So to do that, I can create a sphere. And while this is selected, I'm not going to left click yet, but I'm going to hold down Control. So I'm holding down Control, then left click. And now it doesn't create the first point. It just gives me this axis lock with this white line. And I could left click, and now I'm directly above that. But if I type 50 and then enter, now that has created the first point 50 units above the top of the cone. So now if it's asking for the radius in the command line, and I type 50. Now I've created a sphere of radius 50 units directly above the cone. And just to repeat that if I want to create another sphere 50 above, or let's say 100 units above this corner, I would Control click on the corner, 100. That gives me my center point. And let's create a smaller sphere here of just 25. One thing I didn't cover yesterday is I could just select this by left clicking it and type copy. And now I'm wondering how far I want to move it. And if I select down here, this is the start of the copy point, and this could be the end point. So that's really a vector from this corner to this corner, which means this is going to be copied from there to there, exactly 100, because that's exactly what that distance is. If I was dealing with the snaps here, it'd be kind of awkward to select the center of the sphere and do that. However, if I have center on, then I could select this one to copy, and kind of hard to select, but if I come to the exact right point, I zoom in on it, there, see now it's selecting the center point. And I have nothing to lock to. One thing I didn't cover is if I use F8, then I will lock to the axis like that, and I can type 100, enter. Actually, I think I need to left click, and now that is created exactly there. Then one thing I'm going to double click to expand this. One thing I also didn't cover yesterday is you can left click to select this, then hold down Shift and left click other objects, and that adds to my selection. And if I hold down Control and left click, that subtracts from my selection. So if I want to left click and just hit copy and do this corner here to this corner here. And now I've kind of created those 4 spheres that way. Another command that I'm going to do this all in the next lecture again, but highlight everything and do bounding box. And that just gives me a box around everything, and I can use that to create endpoint to endpoint and then delete the box. And now I just have that point here. So if I want to do a cylinder on top of that, say, for example, cylinder is asking for the base of the cylinder, you choose this midpoint or the endpoint. Radius, if I come down here to this radius here, and then I left click there, that's now selected that as the radius. And now I can do 100. And now that cylinder is perfect on top there. And delete this construction line. Down. So before exporting, one thing I could do is I could type grid up here. And then by clicking on these, I would toggle them from yes to no. So show grid, yes to no. Show grid axes, which is these red X and green for Y. Show grid axes, change that to no. Now, if I right click here and I change this to Arctic mode, then I get this sort of nicer sort of white model with no edges. And put it to ghosted. If I left click any object, it won't let me left click select because the grid is still open. So if I do escape to get out of the grid command, now if I left click and I select an object, And over on this right-hand side, I click this pie symbol. Looks like a slice of pie. That's layers. And I can either right-click and say, change object layer. And that would move what I just selected to layer 1. Another way to do the exact same thing is in properties mode to just change layer. It's currently on default. Change that to layer 2. And then I can change these spheres. And see, that way I selected through the purple sphere, and then I just deselected the purple sphere by holding Control. So make these ones blue. And then cone green. And okay, so there's our geometry. Now in a rendered view, that's just changed the display color. That has not changed the material color. That's a different way to do that. I'll show you that in the next session. But if I just leave it in this, let's say even shaded here. Okay. So one thing, you go to this screen icon, and that's the display option, and change the background from use application settings to solid color. And you can double click that, change it to green. And now if I use this menu here, if you missed yesterday's lecture, one thing I did as well is I left clicked on the shaded viewport, and I left click and hold, and then left click and hold the top thing to drag it out. And holding down Control will copy this icon from this menu to this menu. But holding down Shift will move it, which means it will delete it from the original menu, which you really don't want to do. So can hold down Control and move that from there to there. Now I've got a double one, so I'm going to hold Shift and move it off, which will ask me to delete it. And the other one command I like to bring over is the isolate command. So that's in this light bulb one, which is sort of show and hide. And there it is there, isolate objects. And hold Shift, move, hold Control, copy. So definitely hold Control and copy that over. And then you have it there. I'm going to delete it there because I already have it. Okay, and how that's used is I can select any object and left click the light bulb for hide. I can left click hide. And then if I right click this at any time, that's show objects, which brings everything back. So none of those objects were deleted, they were just hidden. And if I wanted to, let's say, take the cone and isolate it, that means I'm hiding everything other than what's being selected. And that's a way I can work on what is isolated and then unhide by right clicking back on that. And again, this quick menu is just using the central mouse button and kind of using it as a button. So clicking the central mouse button. It's kind of hard to use the quick access menu without the button on the mouse. I think you can type quick. There's something you can type to get this pop-up menu here. Pop-up menu. And type it in. No. There's definitely something you can type to get it. It's much easier with a three button mouse with the middle button or the wheel button to bring that up. So to get this image out, use this capture viewport to file. And of course, you could just type up here, capture. I think it's slightly different. View capture to file. But anyway, that's just the same as left clicking this button. Change resolution from general to custom and change size to 1024 by 1024. That's going to match what's on Miro, so you don't need to scale anything. And then if you wanted, which don't do it now, but if you change 4, you can see the resolution just will quickly export at the same ratio that you selected at 4096 by 4096. You can use that to quickly go to very high resolution images. I want as 1 because I just want the 24. So I can do transparent here, and that will change this into a PNG or TIFF. And I'm just going to leave the green background. And then when I click OK, this is one way of doing saving your image. If here you go down to save to my device, and I do save, then it will just relaunch the menu with your laptop or your computer. So for me, I've got dark mode on, which is why this menu looks slightly different. I can just do, say, downloads and save it there. And that now will have saved it in my computer, not on Citrix. So that's a way of getting your images out of Citrix. Then you can just drag that into Miro. All right. Hope that covers everything. And if you have any questions, just comment in the discussion board and let me know, and I'll answer them as soon as I can. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.